Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So, stress and anxiety are very real emotions for basically everyone, and there's something that I've personally been struggling with over the last couple of months. And so I recently interviewed world-famous psychologist Dr. Judy Smith to try and get some evidence-based advice and tips for how to navigate these emotions a little bit better.
A really simple technique might be, okay, if lots of those thoughts are causing you distress, writing them down, but not only writing them down, starting that sentence with, I'm having thoughts that, or I'm noticing the thought that. So you're immediately kind of priming your mind for, this is a thought. I'm not writing a fact.
A few months ago, I did a blood test and it showed that I've got elevated stress markers based on things that are going on in work and also my personal life. And so dealing with stress is something that I'm actively working on right now, and Dr. Julie's advice has been so helpful. So in this video, we are going to discuss 7 actionable, evidence-based steps that you can use to better manage stress and anxiety. Tip number 1, step back language. Okay, so step back language or distancing language is all about using language that creates some sort of distance between us and our thoughts.
A really simple technique might be, okay, if lots of those thoughts are causing you distress, writing them down, but not only writing them down, starting that sentence with, I'm having thoughts that, or I'm noticing the thought that. So you're immediately kind of priming your mind for, this is a thought. I'm not writing a fact, I'm writing a thought or a perspective. Or the story I'm telling myself is, or the narrative currently is. Those kind of beginnings of sentences can just help to give you that extra arm's length so that you can see that thought for what it is. And just something as simple as that can take some of the power out of it.
Now, I really like this technique because you're not ignoring your feelings or invalidating them. You're allowing them to exist, but you're not taking them as seriously or as sincerely as you might otherwise have done. And there's a really nice way of thinking about this based on the film The Mask. Now, the main character, Stanley Ipkiss, finds this old mask, and when he puts it on, it completely changes his personality. When the mask is on, he can only see the world through the mask. And our thoughts can become like this mask, where if we hold them too close to us, they can color our perception of the world and they can change our personality and all that bad stuff. But with a little bit of practice, we can learn to get some separation between ourselves and the mask. And it's like in the film, when Jim Carrey takes the mask off, and holds it at arm's length, he sees it for what it is, like this wooden husk of a thing. And then he's like, hang on, why was this thing? Is this the thing that I've given so much power over myself? Tip number 2, spin the feelings wheel.
You know, some people are more in touch with their thought processes. So you'll ask them what they feel and they'll say, well, I'm thinking that, and they're kind of reeling off the thoughts to you. Or, you know, you'll ask them what emotion is present and they'll say, well, actually, I've got butterflies in my tummy, or I'm really tense. And so they're more in touch with the physical sensations and emotion. And it's all part of the same experience, right? And I think I mentioned in the book about it being it's almost like weaves in a basket. They're all aspects of the same experience, but you don't necessarily experience the weaves, you experience the whole basket. And so you get this kind of sensation, but you don't necessarily have words to describe that. And when we separate it out into thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, some people just don't have the vocab to give granularity to, you know, they might have happy, sad, angry, frustrated, but they might not have the vocab to kind of give that any nuance.
Right, so this is what a feelings wheel looks like, and it's a great technique that I've personally been getting a lot of benefit out of. And the idea is that you look at the words around the wheel that describe various feelings, and you ask yourself, which of these feelings am I experiencing right now? Or you can ask yourself, which of these feelings have I experienced over the last, let's say, 2 weeks? So if, like me, you sometimes have feelings and you're not exactly sure what they are, then having a look at a feelings wheel can be a really helpful way of being able to identify what the specific feeling or emotion actually is. Now, the feelings wheel was invented by psychologist Robert Plutchik, and it helps you get more specific about what it is you're feeling. If you're feeling really happy, for example, you can follow the wheel and maybe identify that what you're really feeling is proud. And then pride might actually be confidence. You're doing a good job in work and things are on track. But this also works for more negative emotions. If you're feeling sad, for example, you can get more granular and see that actually what I'm feeling is despair. But even deeper down from despair, you might realize that you're feeling powerless, and then you can think about why that might be. Maybe you're stuck in a job that you hate and that's what's getting you down, or you've got your exams to take and you feel like you can't do much to change the outcome. All of that would lead to a feeling of powerlessness. And being able to say, I feel powerless, instead of just, I feel sad, can often help you find better solutions, because sad is kind of vague and often difficult to change. But when you say you're feeling powerless, that has tangible steps that you can potentially take. And in fact, researcher Dr. Wilcox has found that the better we are at talking about our emotions, the better our health outcomes seem to be, and the better we seem to be at regulating our emotions as well. If you're interested in potentially finding someone to talk about your emotions with, then I'm delighted to say this video is a paid partnership with BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 20,000 credentialed therapists. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your preferences when it comes to therapy, and this way BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. And then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's by phone or by text or by video call. And regardless of whether you have a specific mental health diagnosis like depression or anxiety or anything else, or if you're just a human living in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy with a professional can often give you the tools that you might need to navigate life. You can message your therapist at any time, and you can always schedule appointments whenever it's convenient for you. And if your therapist isn't the right fit for whatever reason, you can switch to a different therapist at no additional charge. And with BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality that you would expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who's custom picked for you, with more scheduling flexibility and at a much more affordable price. So if any of that sounds up your street, you can head over to betterhelp.com/Ali Abdaal. That's betterhelp.com/Ali Abdaal. And if you use that link, which is also in the video description, then you will get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. So thank you so much to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Tip number 3, early warning feelings. So one interesting way of approaching our feelings is to use them as a sort of early warning system for other problems that might be happening in our life.
And sometimes those early feelings can be the most valuable, right? When we listen to them. So I think we have to, listen to our emotions as we would listen to any message and hold it lightly. Accept that it's, okay, this is one possible version of this reality, and that it's the first feeling I got. So I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to also stay open to other perspectives or the rest of experience. And so just because it's not the one truth doesn't mean it has to be completely disregarded. There are lots of really valuable things that aren't the be all and end all. So it's, holding it as valuable, but realizing that if we blinker ourselves and only look at that as the possible truth, we're really restricting ourselves there, and you can really go down a hellhole in some ways if your thoughts are distressing or painful and that kind of thing.
And in particular in my life, the way that I've personally been struggling with this literally over the last few weeks is kind of feelings of meaninglessness and, I guess, anxiety and burnout and stuff when it comes to, for example, making these YouTube videos. I've been doing this thing for over 6 years now, and especially with my book coming out, which you can pre-order down below if you feel like it, especially with my book coming out, there's been a lot of stuff that's going on with podcasts and the YouTube channel and the business and all this kind of stuff. And it's felt pretty stressful and overwhelming at times. And early on in the process, I sort of felt like, whatevs, I can push through. It's not like I'm a coal miner. What right do I have to potentially feel stressed or feel overwhelmed? I'm just making YouTube videos on the internet, for God's sake. But since actually seeing a therapist myself and then also doing that interview with Dr. Julie, I've realized that these feelings are things that we shouldn't really ignore, because even a minor niggle of stress or overwhelm when you're doing something repeatedly is a thing that can easily compound over time. And there are so many creators and entrepreneurs who I've spoken to about this who say that they should have recognized the early warning signs of overwhelm or of burnout because they could have done something about it rather than just think of it as something to power through. Tip number 4, pause the personalizing. Now, personalizing is a cognitive bias where when things happen, we're very quick to assume that those things are our fault.
So let's say you're walking down the street and you see someone you know on the other side of the street. So you wave and you say hi, and they don't, you feel like they've seen you, but they don't wave back. And then your brain goes straight to, that thing I said the other day must have offended her. She must hate me. Everyone must be talking about me. I'm so awful. What was I thinking? How could I say something like that? And you go down this kind of spiral. Yeah. And if you kind of get the bird's eye view from that scenario, we could sit down here and scribble out 10,000 reasons why that person might not have smiled. Yeah. But you go down this hole of kind of self-loathing. And so you're taking an event that could have lots of explanations or could be fairly neutral, and you're making it about you, and often in a negative way that is kind of painful or hurtful to you. So you kind of personalize stuff.
Now, personalizing can be a very natural response because it's so easy for us to focus on ourselves and the way other people interact with us. But if we jump to too many of these conclusions about ourselves being the sole cause of, actions or feelings around us, then that can make us pretty stressed and miserable. And in a way, personalizing is a type of catastrophizing, which has become quite a buzzword these days, but there's a lot of truth to it. Like, imagine you were going through a breakup, for example. You might feel hurt and alone, but instead of seeing this as the end of one relationship, if you catastrophize and personalize, then your mind tells you that if it didn't work out with this person, then all of your relationships are going to fail and that no one's ever going to love you. And then things escalate to the point where you're convinced that you're going to die alone. But obviously this is not reality. These anxious thought spirals can feel so real when we're going through them in the moment. But we need to remind ourselves that setbacks are a part of life, and just going through one of them doesn't mean we're going to continue getting that same setback over and over again. Tip number 5, drop the mental filter. Now, the mental filter is, again, something that our mind does that shows us the world in a way more negative light.
I did a video on this actually, where I used like a big tray, like a big calendar type thing, and I put kind of different sized beans in to show kind of different types of thoughts. And the mental filter is often, you get this a lot with depression actually, where the good things that happen, for example, or thoughts about things that could actually make you feel a bit better, tend to get filtered out and kind of disregarded and left. And then what you're left with to focus on is all the stuff that makes you feel worse and the negative stuff.
Now, this is something that I'm personally very guilty of all the time. For example, instead of focusing on all the positive comments that you guys very kindly leave on the videos, I'll often scroll through and I'll be like, I'll disregard all the positive comments and I'll see one negative comment. And then that comment is the one that I'm thinking about for hours and sometimes even days, maybe sometimes even weeks at a time, which is just really unhealthy and not particularly helpful. And you might have noticed this in your own life as well. Like, let's say you're doing an exam and the mind fixates on the questions that we know we got wrong, rather than all of the, hopefully, more questions that we got right. And this mental filter is something that used to be very useful back in the day. Like, our brains are survival machines and they've evolved to make us very aware of any potential threat to our survival. So back in the day, when you're worried about whether you might get mauled by a lion or whether you might get ostracized from your tribe and therefore get mauled by a lion, the mental filter for negativity is very helpful because you're hyper aware of anything you say that the village elder might misconstrue and then end up kicking you out of the tribe, or anything in your environment that can potentially be harmful. But in the current world that we're in, where we're not fighting for our survival and we don't really have those sorts of risks, the mind hasn't yet evolved to take that into account, and so it's always hyper aware of anything that's potentially negative in the environment around us, which then obviously contributes to stress and anxiety in a somewhat needless fashion. And so naturally the key here is to recognize that this is in fact a cognitive bias, that this negative mental filter does exist, and to remind ourselves consciously to pay more attention to the positive things in our life, not just the negative ones. And if you're interested in getting a positive thing in your life every Sunday, you might like to check out my completely free email newsletter that's called Sunday Snippets. Basically, every Sunday I send a short email with some thoughts for the week, stuff that I've been thinking about, stuff I've been reading and learning, and some links to things like books and articles and videos and podcasts that I found particularly valuable. There are over 400,000 people that get this completely free email every week, and it's totally free. You can unsubscribe anytime, so you might like to check that out by heading over to aliabdaal.com/Sunday or hitting the link in the video description. Tip number 6, the mindfulness muscle. And again, mindfulness is a bit of a buzzword in the mental health space, but there seems to be this idea often, if you Google images of mindfulness, that it's all about taking a hot bath or lighting a candle or doing your skincare routine. And it can absolutely be all of those things, but the real value of mindfulness is that it's all about focusing on the present and not allowing our thoughts to run wild. Now, in Dr. Julie's case, she talked about how she would use mindfulness during stressful periods of her life. She'd go for a run in the afternoon, and as she would run, she would set herself the task of just focusing on the sound of her footsteps on the path. And this can sometimes be really difficult because the mind loves to bring us back to all of the things that are stressing us out.
It's not that you have this goal of ultimate focus and no other thoughts distract you and, a kind of monk style kind of image, that stereotypical thing that people think of. It was more that I constantly made a choice about where I was going to place my attention in those moments. And that gave me, for this sort of half-hour jog or whatever it was, it meant that I chose not to worry for that time. I chose not to overthink everything. I knew I couldn't do anything about it, right? I'm out in the middle of the forest running. So I chose to just focus on the here and now for that time. It was in those sort of micro moments, a little break for my brain, but it was work in a sense that I had to keep bringing my attention back. And that's the thing, is mindfulness isn't sort of an indulgent rest. It's not like deep relaxation.
Yeah.
It's almost gym for the mind. So you're building that mental muscle to be able to notice where your mind is, notice if it's helpful for you or not, and then bring it back to now.
Now, mindfulness is something that we all need to work on, this whole idea of staying in the present moment and not letting our thoughts run wild. It's something I personally do struggle with because I often find myself, with my mind wandering. And apparently meditation is really helpful for this. There are so many studies that show that meditation really helps with mindfulness, which is great for mental health. I've been trying to incorporate meditation into my life. I haven't quite figured out a way of actually doing it every single day, but it's something I'm actively working on just because the benefits of meditation are so huge. And tip number 7, the self-soothing box. Now, Dr. Julie talks about this idea of creating for yourself a self-soothing box, which is like this proverbial box of strategies and activities and tools that bring you comfort, that help soothe you, that you can use as a sort of self-help, literally, technique if you're experiencing stress or anxiety or anything like that.
It's the idea that it's kind of mindfulness, so you use all of your senses to help create that feeling of safety. And that's really what you want to do, is bring a sense of safeness to the moment. It might be a piece of music that you know kind of generates certain feelings for you, or it might be a perfume that you associate with love and safety, like your mum's perfume or lavender or something like that. Or it might be something that you can taste that you enjoy that kind of brings you to the present, or lots of different things. So you can use all your different senses. So you can put different things in a box to kind of soothe you through difficult moments.
So these are 7 evidence-based strategies that I've personally been finding quite helpful as a way of managing stress and anxiety in various different parts of life. If you need any more help and support when it comes to your mental health, I'll put links to some really helpful resources down in the video description. And if you do feel like you're not coping, then do please consider reaching out to someone for help. Self-help is all very good, and obviously I'm a huge fan of it, but it's really helpful to be able to talk to other people about the struggles that we're going through. But speaking of self-help, one of the most effective ways I've personally found of managing my own stress and anxiety is journaling. And if you're interested in how you can apply journaling to your life, you might like to check out this video over here, which is my ultimate guide to journaling for better mental health and mental clarity, and to help figure out what you actually want to do with your life. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.